Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. I want you to just imagine for a second waking up tomorrow morning to a headline so completely unbelievable, so totally out of left field that you actually have to read it twice just to process what the words are even saying. For one impossible second, the world would feel like history itself had just broken straight through your screen and walked right back into the present day.
The headline, "What if Italy invaded France tomorrow?" Now just sit with the visceral shock of that for a moment. Picture the sheer silence right before the panic hits. Picture millions of phones suddenly lighting up in the dark across the continent. You'd have television anchors completely losing their calm on live broadcasts for a few seconds before forcing it back together. Millions of us would be desperately trying to figure out if this is real or, just some terrible mistake. Has the world really become a place where even the most established European nations can suddenly turn from neighbors into enemies overnight?
Section 1. The Impossible Headline. To really understand why this feels so deeply impossible, we have to look at how profoundly connected these two nations actually are. We're not just talking about lines on a map here. These are two of the most recognizable nations in Europe, intimately linked by massive trade networks, tourism, diplomacy, and shared culture. I mean, we've spent decades safely assuming that modern Europe was built on cooperation rather than conquest, right? But if a headline like this hit, it wouldn't just be a military event. It would be a terrifying collapse of that exact assumption. The moment official confirmations start rolling in and borders suddenly slam shut, reality would settle in with an absolute crushing weight.
Section 2. Panic in the information space.
If this were to actually happen, the very first reaction across the continent wouldn't be tanks rolling down the streets or missiles flying overhead. It would be absolute, unadulterated confusion. Because, let's be real, in our modern world, war begins on our screens long before it ever hits the ground. Within minutes, social media would just explode with rumors, unverified videos, and outright panic. Give it a few hours, and news channels are interrupting every program. Governments are blasting emergency notices to our phones, and diplomats are scrambling. By nightfall, the entire continent would be completely paralyzed. That level of uncertainty is incredibly dangerous when nations are teetering right on the tipping point of turning a crisis into a full-blown disaster.
Naturally, the public would immediately demand answers. Why did this happen? Was it just a localized border incident, a massive cyber attack, maybe a political collapse, or some sort of rogue operation? People desperately want perfect clarity in moments like that. But in those first chaotic hours, the massive gap between the simple truth we all desire and the messy, politically poisonous complexity of reality, well, that gap is exactly where panic grows and spreads like wildfire.
Section 3. The immediate human cost. We really need to peel back these high-level geopolitical layers for a second and look at the immediate human toll in cities from Paris and Marseille to Rome and Milan. In the dead of night, ordinary people would be waking up to an emergency that was literally never supposed to happen. Families would be staring at their screens, completely frozen, trying to figure out, do we stay? Do we flee to safety? Do we shelter right here? Imagine a mother desperately trying to project a sense of calm to her children while the television just keeps repeating the exact same unbearable updates.
We'd see instant panic buying in communities across both countries. It's a classic response. Imagine a shopkeeper watching their neighbors rushing in to completely clear the shelves of water, food, batteries, and medicine. At that exact same moment, you'd have college students frantically checking their phones to see if trains are even still running. You'd have fathers desperately trying to reach their relatives who are suddenly trapped across a border that just became hostile territory.
And it just expands from there. A hospital worker grimly preparing for a sudden rush of injured arrivals. A tourist trapped in a hotel room wondering how on earth they're going to get a flight home. You see, war never really begins for everyone at the exact same second. But as these specific, very real human stories highlight, it always begins with the shared, universal emotion of sheer fear.
Section 4. Europe's continental earthquake.
Now, while civilians are trapped in the state of panic, the political and economic response would hit like a massive earthquake. We're talking about shaking alliances like NATO and the European Union down to their absolute cores. The entire project of European integration is built on this fundamental idea. Member states resolve their disputes through institutions, law, and diplomacy, never by invading one another. A conflict right in the geographic and economic center of Europe would totally shatter that foundation. Major powers like the US, the UK, and Germany would immediately rush for de-escalation, because the whole concept of modern Europe would literally be cracking beneath their feet.
And the economic shock? It would be staggering. France and Italy are absolutely central to Europe's trade, manufacturing, banking, and agriculture. So step 1, investors panic and markets instantly fall. Step 2, supply chains break down and transport corridors completely fail. And finally, step 3, those economic shockwaves hit the grocery store, the gas station, and the job market hundreds of miles away. It proves a harsh truth about modern conflict. The physical battlefield might be regional, but the economic suffering, that is continental.
The humanitarian consequences would literally multiply by the hour. Hospitals strained way past capacity, families instantly separated by closed borders, the most vulnerable populations completely stranded without help. It raises massive, urgent questions about whether people can reach shelter or get basic medicine before a sudden crisis irreversibly turns into a total catastrophe. The distance between a stable, normal life and a terrible one can literally be measured in hours.
Section 5. The fragility of peace. If we look beyond that massive initial shock, I think the most terrifying aspect is how uncontrollably things could escalate across our highly connected modern systems. Think airspace, cyber networks, transport grids. No one can guarantee that the first move stays the last move. When two deeply connected nations violently collide, the pressure to keep things contained is immense, sure, but every single decision carries massive risk. Retaliation creates a new response, and suddenly, restraint becomes incredibly difficult. It really becomes a battle of the symbols versus the fracture. You see, France and Italy aren't just countries with armies. They are powerful symbols of art, history, identity, and the very idea of modern Europe itself. To see them at war is to witness a profound fracture in the European imagination. It's a pretty dark reminder that history never truly disappears. It just waits, watching for peaceful institutions to fail. And then there's the aftermath. Displaced families, closed businesses, interrupted schooling, and years spent just trying to repair shattered public trust. Wars do not end when the initial headlines fade. Even if a conflict like this ended quickly, ordinary people would carry the memory in their bodies, in their sleep, and in their panicked reactions to future news alerts for generations to come. I think the global lesson of this entire explainer really comes down to this thought right here. Stability is an achievement that can be lost if people stop defending it. Peace in the modern age is not automatic, guys. It isn't guaranteed just because it existed yesterday. Trust among nations requires active, daily work from both leaders and citizens to preserve it. So how quickly do we forget that war can still happen? I really want to leave you with this final thought to chew on today. Sometimes the scariest reality we face isn't just that a massive sudden war can happen. It's how easily and how dangerously we all assume it never will.